A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So glad to see everybody here on this wonderful, cool afternoon. I don't know where you are right now, but where I'm here, based in Singapore, in somewhere in Bukit Timah. It's cool. It's lovely on the outside here. So everyone, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming to Smart Conversation for Emotionally Intelligent Teams. My name is Kim Pong, and I am the CEO and founder of StrengthsAsia. Where at the very core of everything that we do here in StrengthsAsia, it's about building a culture of engagement. And by that, it's how do we get people in our teams, in our leadership, in our organizations to be more engaged, to be more energized, to be more satisfied, to be more influential in their work and in their relationships with one another. So this is one of those series that my team and I have been producing to help all the leaders, all the managers, and all the executives and people like you out there to become more engaged in the things that we do and in the relationship that we have. So thank you very much. Welcome. It's been a while since the last time we met each other. So I'm really, really glad that we are back on track here. Now today, we're talking about this simple idea of smart conversations for emotionally intelligent teams here. And I like to, in the previous session, I did talk a little bit about emotional intelligence. So for those of you that, that came for my talk previously, you probably will remember a little bit of what I said. But I think for the benefit for those of you who are coming here for the first time, I'm just going to do a really quick refresher on what emotional intelligence is. So the first one really is about, for emotional intelligence, let's talk about the word emotional, right? What is the meaning of that? Well, I did some Google searches, and this is what Google tell me. And emotional means it's about relating to a person's emotions. So that's really, really straightforward here. What about intelligence? Well, intelligence actually has two ideas here. One is about the data, the information, and the other one is about the application. So it is the ability to acquire intelligence, the data, the information, and to apply knowledge and skills, right? And that is the intelligence of application. So when we put emotional intelligence together, essentially it meant it is the ability to relate, to acquire, and to apply a person's emotions. Straightforward as that, right? And when does emotional intelligence happen? Well, emotional intelligence begins when you become aware of what you are feeling or what others are feeling, and then you decide on how you're going to respond to one another. So this is really what emotional intelligence is all about. And one of the guys by the name of Patrick Lencioni, and a number of you actually may know who he is. I may have murdered my pronunciation of his name, but Patrick Lencioni is a big person, in many years on team leadership, on team engagement. And I love, the way he defined emotional intelligence, and it fits really, really aptly in the context of what we are talking about today. And Patrick Lencioni basically talks about emotional intelligence. It is how we understand people and how we use our words and actions to bring the best in people. I really love that, right? It is how we understand people around us, the differences, the emotions, the responses of people, and then using our words, using our actions to bring about the very best of people around us. I love that. So that's emotional intelligence, everybody. And for now, let's move on to the next piece here, right? Because we're talking about smart conversations for emotionally intelligent teams. So what are emotionally intelligent teams? Well, they are teams that actually understand their team members, and they use their words, they use their actions to bring about the best in each other, right? I love that definition. Now let's talk about a little bit about teams. What do you think are the key problems of teams today? So I'm going to take it that every one of you here in this room, are working or have worked before. So you're very familiar with the whole idea of teams and organization. So can I invite you right now, right, to use the chat box. Use the chat box very quickly and just share with me one or two ideas here. What do you think, are the problems of teams today? So when teams comes together, what do you think are the top common problems of teams in the world, in Singapore today? So very quickly, can I invite you, use the chat box right now and kind of plunk in your response and plunk in your answers, right? So I'm just going to wait a couple of seconds here, for all of you here to share your ideas here. So my question once again, what are the top problems of teams, from your own personal experience, from your own personal observation, from what you know, what are they? All right. So let me just hang back and just wait for everybody to put in your response for me. Thank you very much. So Michael came up really quickly, and it says it's the lack of trust, right? Jingwen says maybe includes several different opinions in the team. Yeah, it's about the differences, the opinions in the teams. RN Ranat says communication, respect for each other. Graham Sprigg says organizational politics, not understanding others' perspective, trust. I love that. Catherine Cheng says the difference of expectations. And Joyce Chu says different priorities. Mark Lim says feeling defensive when ideas differ from team members. I love that, right? Vanessa says communications, right? Different working style, absolutely. GM says taking opinions personally. Now that happens all the time, right? We intentionally enforce ourselves on other people's opinions, and sometimes that becomes highly intrusive, isn't it? And one link Casey says, not sharing information, right? Why is it that we are not asking questions that we should, or sharing information that we must, right? Why is that not happening? Well, I did some really quick, search, of course, around the internet, and here are my top 5 favorites, right, of what I think are the problems of teams. So the first one is this, right? It is about the lack of trust. And this was highlighted by Michael, lack of trust. Now, what is this all about? Think about trust, right? When you say, I don't trust someone, what exactly do you mean? Well, if you think about it, there are 3 simple ideas that you can actually break down to help you understand what you mean when you say, I don't trust somebody. And, and essentially the first one is this, right? It is about authenticity. Now, I don't trust that person because I don't think he's real. I don't think he means what he says. I don't think she means what she says, right? It's about authenticity. Now, the second thing about trust here is about competency. I don't trust that person because I don't believe that he or she can do the work that they're supposed to be doing. And because of that, I don't trust him or her with the work. And the third idea of trust here, ladies and gentlemen, is about care and compassion. I don't trust John, I don't trust Mary, because I don't feel that whatever they're doing, they actually care about me, or they actually care about what my teams are doing. They only care about themselves. So a lot of it is about the lack of trust in one of these 3 areas here, right? Authenticity, the realness of a person. Number 2, the competency, the ability. And last but not least, it is about the care and the compassion. Do you care for me? The second, top problems of teams is conflict and tensions. So I think just now in our chat box, a number of us did talk about, feeling defensive when ideas differ from teams, not sharing information, taking opinions, personally. Well, these do cause conflict and tensions. And the truth is this, ladies and gentlemen, conflict and tensions happens all the time, right? I mean, if there's anyone that goes to work and never ever experienced conflict and tensions, I would love to talk to you, because this is something that I've never ever seen before in my life. And I've been training and coaching leaders and teams for the past 15, 20 years. I've never seen any of that. So conflicts and tensions, happens all the time. The problem is not about, are they there? They are there. But the problem is, how do we manage conflicts and how do we diffuse tension? The third problem that most people actually will experience is about low engagement. Well, let me break down engagement in simple terms for you, ladies and gentlemen. When you say someone is actively engaged on your team, or the leaders are really engaged in doing whatever they're doing, what are we saying? Well, we're actually talking about 2 ideas here. Number 1, it's about their influence and impact. And number 2, it's about their satisfaction. So highly engaged people are highly energized and highly satisfied. At the same time, they are also very impactful in the work that they do. So the 2 axes, right? Satisfaction and impact, they are here at the top right-hand corner, right? They are highly energized, satisfied, and they're impactful. In other words, they enjoy doing the work that they're doing. And in the process, they gain immense joy and satisfaction working with the teams or working in the work that they do. So the idea of low engagement is, how do we get people, right? How do we get people out from a space whereby they may be very impactful, but maybe at the same time, they may have low satisfaction. Or some people may actually be really cool about where they are in the workplace, but they're actually quite lousy and they're slackers, or they're not really doing any work at all. The idea here is this, right? How do we move our teams from low engagement to high engagement? The fourth idea is the lack of psychological safety. Now, I think, this has been a trending topic in probably the last 12 to 24 months, right? And there are a number of authors that have been writing about the whole idea of psychological safety. Timothy Clark for one, Amy Edmondson for two, right? So psychological safety, what is it? It is about the sense of feeling safe and secure that allows us in a team setting to dare to ask questions and share concerns and experiment without fear of the consequences, right? So in other words, you are never penalized, in asking questions or sharing concerns, but because of our contributions, it allows us to challenge status quo. It allows us to be more agile, allows us to be more innovative. And this can only happen in the space of psychological safety, all right? And then the next thing here is this, right? The fifth problem that we see all the time is ineffective communication. Now, this is really a very common problem in many, many teams. And it doesn't matter whether you've been here for the last 125 years or have been here for since yesterday, right? Ineffective communication is omnipresent in every situation. And the inability to communicate means the inability to do many things. You cannot convey your intentions the way it's intended. You cannot be as influential as you wanted. And very often, people may not be clear in understanding what is it that you want, and they may not be clear in understanding, how can we relate to one another. So here we are, right? The top 5 problems that teams typically face: lack of trust, conflict and tensions, low engagement, lack of psychological safety, and last but not least, ineffective communication. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to do something here again, right, on the chat box, and I need your response on this. Now, if you look at all these 5 problems here, and you are asked or you're tasked, to prioritize these problems here. In other words, which is the most important problem that you must solve first, right, before the rest follow? What would be your choice, right? Would your choice be trust, conflict and tensions, low engagement, psychological safety, ineffective communication, right? So in other words, I'm asking you, right, out of these 5 problems here, prioritize them, right? Which is the topmost problem that you think teams should immediately look at and start solving, right? So everybody, let's take a couple of seconds here and let's go for it, right? So a lot of, so Amrana came in with ineffective communication, Vanessa's ineffective communication, Mark says ineffective communications, Graham ineffective communication, Catherine says trust, Jingwen says trust, Ling Da Liu, Xing Ling says trust, beautiful. Conflicts and tensions, right? Any more, right? I'm just going to wait another 10 more seconds before I close the chat for this. So one link case is low engagement, anything else, right? So as I look across this whole thing, right, a lot of it is focused on ineffective communication. Well, guess what? If you were to look at what the Harvard research talk about, if you were to look at a lot of coaches, right, who are training teams, and you ask them a simple question: what is the most important problem that you must fix for teams to be able to come together? And that one thing that comes up constantly, all the time, frequently, right? It's communication. It is the inability for us to communicate well and clearly that actually leads to the lack of trust, that leads to the conflicts and tensions, that possibly leads to low engagement and essentially sets in, the lack of psychological safety. So for example, if you are a leader, the higher you go, the more infectious you will be in psychological safety. So how you talk actually dictates the safety or the safeness of people in your teams here. So communication is this thing here, right? It's the number one problem that I think we have to look at and think about it. Why is that? Because if you think about it, Everything that we have experienced is really about the conversations that we have. Now, a number of you who knows me, you hear me say this all the time. I'm deeply passionate about this particular statement here, right? Everything is conversation. Why is that? Because leadership is conversation, relationship is conversation, culture is conversation. Think about the leaders that you enjoy working with. The conversations are usually good, isn't it? You felt heard, you felt included, you felt noticed. Think about the relationships that you have in your teams, the people that you enjoy working with, there's open, unhindered communication. But the people that you don't quite like, what do? You kind of have transactional conversations, or at most, right? Or even worse, right? You may not even have any conversations at all. Think about the culture of an organization. Very often I'm asked the question, right? How do I build culture? Or what is the culture in my teams like? My simple response is this, is the following, right? Which is, how do your team members talk to one another, right? Are they able to talk, about difficult problems, or do they just skim over it? Are they capable of rich and difficult conversations? How we talk dictates the quality of the culture in our teams. And one of the things I've learned about conversation is this, right? Amazing things do happen, when the quality of the conversations is good. You want to solve a lot of problems in the world, one of the things that you really want to talk about is how do we have better conversations with one another. So conversations. So how do smart teams, how do emotionally intelligent teams, right? Teams who's aware of each other, who wants to use their words and actions to bring the best out of people, how do they have smart conversations? Well, this is exactly the topic that we are talking about. And essentially, there are three key ideas here. The first one is focus, right? And focus is about, hey, what are we talking about? The second one is the outcomes. And outcomes is about, hey, where are we going with this conversation, right? Why are we doing this? And a third key essentially is the journey of conversations. It's going to take some time to get it right. Now, conversations are never, ever going to fix something right away. But essentially, right, you realize that you need conversations, through the journey to get some things right, and eventually to understand, to accept, and to be able to, to embrace everybody in the teams here. So these are the three things, right? Focus, outcomes, and journey. So let me just start off with focus. What are we talking about? And I want to introduce, something that I've created, for my clients, and it's called a conversation spectrum. So when we are talking, we are likely to be focusing on certain spectrum across this conversation spectrum here, right? We could be focusing on our experience, we could be focusing on our observation, or we could be focusing on our imagination. So let me just talk a little bit about what they are, right? Now, every one of us, actually, when we talk, we do gravitate towards certain spectrum across the conversation spectrum, right? Could be experience, could be observation, could be imagination. So let me just talk a little bit about that right now. So experience. What is experience? Experience is about our past, right? It is about what is known to us. It is about what is known to the team. So this could be individuals or the teams here, right? So when you talk about experience here, and you're having conversations and you're often focusing on the past, and let's assume, for the sake of understanding this particular spectrum, that, when we focus on experience, we ignore observation, we ignore imagination, right? So it's just purely focused on the past and the experience here. What happens? If we are good at doing that, right? The positive outcomes of talking, through our experience is that we are knowledgeable, right? We can be very experienced in the things that we do, and at the same time, we can be highly credible. So when team members, right, are able to draw on their experience and talk about it in a positive way at the right time, at the right place with the right people, they bring these attributes and qualities to the teams. But what if you're stuck on experience and you can do nothing but just talk about experience, right? There's a negative impact on that. And the negative impact is this: you become incurious, you become inflexible, and very likely you become out of touch because you rely on your experience. You want to make sure things happen according to your experience. You want to make sure that things happen out, properly. But because of that, you lack the curiosity, you lack the flexibility to adopt new things, new ways for the present and for the future. Now let's move on to observation. What is observation? Observation is about focusing our conversations on the present, right? And it's about what is happening now. What is it that I see now? What is it that I know now? So once again, right, if you focus just on the present moment and ignore, the past and ignore the future, then essentially this is what can happen, right? If you're good in doing this, right, using it at the right time, at the right place with people, the positive outcomes is this: you're informed, you're agile. At the same time, you're relevant to the conversations, you're relevant to the problems or the challenges that the teams are facing. But if you, kind of overuse this and, you refuse to move across other spectrums and you stay on even though the present is no longer welcome, then the negative outcome is that you become reactive, you become short-term, and you may very well be stuck in status quo. And the last one here is imagination. This is about the future. This is something that you and I, has not yet known. This is something that, is not yet happened. And the same thing, right? If you focus on that, the positive outcomes of something like this could be curious, courageous, and innovative. And every team needs that, right? To be curious, to be courageous, to be innovative. But if your team is really just focused on the future and nothing else, then the negative impact could be your team is dreamy, impractical, and not anchored on the missions or the KPIs, right? You're just thinking of creating new things, but they really have no value or worth. So essentially, when you talk about, the conversation spectrum, we are talking about, not just being stuck in one part of the spectrum, experience or observation or imagination, but it's about helping us move across the different areas of the spectrum as and when it's required. Smart teams are clear on what they're talking about. Smart teams can engineer or can direct each other's, right? Hey, all right, I think we've talked enough about experience, right? What about some imagination here? Or what is it that we are seeing today that must make us change what we must do? That is focus. Now let's move on to the second key of smart conversation, and that is outcome. It is about where are we going? I would like to introduce, sound wave again, and a number of you actually have heard me talk about this a lot. Sound wave to me is probably, one of the best assessment tools around that allows you to figure out how you talk each time. Every one of us are habitual in our conversations, but because we are habitual, very often the outcomes, the outcomes and the impact that we desire is unpredictable. And sound wave help us know how we talk so that we can target our talk. And Soundwave has this wonderful framework called the arc of connection. It essentially is about a journey of relationships. It's about where are you going with your conversations? Where are you going with the way you talk? And essentially, if you want to have team engagement, you want to build trust, you want to build psychological safety, you want to make sure that your teams are highly engaged, well, there are three simple ideas across this arc of connection that you want to achieve as an outcome in the relationships of one another. Number one is about recognizing each other, right? And it's about, hey, I hear you, I see you. Number two is about the rapport, right? The collaborativeness of the team, right? How can we talk? How can we engage each other in our conversations that brings people together? And the last one, is trust. How can we, through our conversations, build trust across authenticity, across competency, across, care and compassion here? So let me just talk the first one about recognition. Now, Timothy Clark is someone that I admire a lot, and he wrote a lot on psychological safety, and he noted one thing, right? People in teams do not need to be agreed with all the time. That's not what they require. But the innate, natural need of people in teams is to be recognized, is to be seen, is to be included, is to be heard. That need is more fundamental, more foundational, right, than any other needs in members of the teams. So have you ever been in conversations where somebody's talking, or you are talking, and then the minute you finish talking, you are totally ignored and the subject matter has changed, right? The person that's responding to you is talking about something else, and you were never ever acknowledged in those conversations. My question to you is this: how did you feel, right? Horrible, right? No. So the whole idea is really about inclusion here, right? It's about recognizing. So how can we talk in such a way that actually makes us figure out, how can I make sure that you are heard? How can I make sure that you are seen? How can I make sure that I've acknowledged, you? It doesn't matter whether I agree with you or disagree. I want to acknowledge you. The second arc of connection here is rapport. So the idea is this, right? If you want to build rapport, the fundamental thing is to be able to build recognition first. And after you build recognition, it moves into the next arc here, which is rapport. And the idea is just, how can I talk in such a way where I can embrace your differences, where I can acknowledge, your differences and your strength? How can I be more aware of your emotions and how you're feeling at the moment, so that I can bring all these things together and help us work with one another? Every difference is good. Diversity brings about, ideas, brings about growth, brings about agility, right? So being able to build rapport is key in the art of connection. And the last one, if you have recognition, if you have rapport, and then you probably are moving to the next arc here, which is about building trust. And to build trust simply means this: I know you. So the way we talk to people, if we acknowledge people, the way we talk to people, if we bring people, to work together despite our differences, to be able to acknowledge each other's strengths and to be courageously vulnerable in each other's, weaknesses here, this is where trust begin to take a stake here. Now, as we move across this arc of connection, ladies and gentlemen, from recognition, from rapport to trust, people in your teams will begin to feel safer. They'll begin to feel more empowered. They begin to feel more open to different things that are going on here. So the idea is this: it is not about, where we want to go, but it's about our conversations that leads us to where we want to go. And the last one here is outcome, right? So where are we? Sorry, it's the arc of connection here, right? The last one is outcomes here, right? I'm sorry. Sorry, I just mixed it up. The last one is journey. I got a bit confused with my slides here. The last one is journey. So for journey, it simply means, right, it's going to take some time to get there. And these are the 4 things that I like to recommend to everybody, so that it allows you to be patient. It allows you to be resilient in the journey. And it's my AACC principle, right? A is to be aware. 2 is to accept. 3 is to be curious. 4 is to be courageous. And essentially it means this, right? In every team, there are different strengths. In every team, there are many differences in opinions. In every team, there are all variety of emotions. Now, people cannot help how they feel, and nobody chose to be different for different sake. This is the way we are. And I like to assume that when teams comes together, our values are good, our intentions are good. So how do teams, work together well? How do teams, be able to embrace the emotional intelligence of each other, the strength of each other, the differences of each other? Well, it is about, first of all, be aware. I'm aware of what's going on here. And number 2, accept people for who they are. And number 3, be curious, right? Be curious simply means this, right? Don't be stuck in experience. Don't be stuck in observation. Don't be stuck in imagination. Move across the conversation spectrum to build the relationships, on sound waves, arc of connection, the recognition, the rapport, and the trust here, right? Be curious to ask questions. Be curious to engage. And the last thing here is this, right? If you have never done this before, then you need to be courageous. To be courageous to experiment it, to courageous to try this. So that's it, right? So I think I'm done with my sharing today. Time passes so fast. I'm a little bit over time here. But before I let you go, ladies and gentlemen, if you are resonating with what I'm saying here and you want to find out more about, how do you, understand this arc of connection? How do you build this, conversation spectrum? How do you, have smart conversations in your teams? Well, go ahead, and join us for our workshops here. And we have 2 workshops that are coming up in October. One is strength-based emotional intelligence workshop. It's like, how do you know your strengths, your motivations, and how does it combine with your emotional intelligence? And how is this applicable to you, both individually and in your teams? The second one is a power of communication workshop, where we help you understand what is your sound wave and how can you influence and impact people through the way you talk. Now, you can either scan the QR code or you can click on the links that my colleagues has put up on the chat box. So go ahead, and do that. So that's it. I'm done. For the workshops here. Sorry, for the conversation here today. So if any one of you, have any question, go ahead. Write your question on the chat box, or turn on your video and talk to me, over Zoom here. And for those of you that needs to go, thank you for coming. Go ahead and have a great and wonderful day here, right? So I'm going to hang back for about maybe 5 minutes if there are any questions from anyone here, right? So let's do that. Are there any questions? Are there any comments? Are there any insights I can help anyone with? So I'm just going to hang back for 5 minutes. If there's nobody, then I'll close the session. You can use the chat box to engage me in the questions, or you can just turn on your microphone and talk to me over Zoom, all right? So thank you everybody for coming. Have a great day ahead. I'm just gonna wait for a little while. Looks like there may not be any questions. So either I'm doing a fantastic job, I'm really, really clear, or you guys are super psyched and you guys are super informed. All right, very cool. Great. So with that, everybody, thank you very much. I will sign off right now. Have a great day. And remember, right, you have the ability to move across your conversation spectrum to build the relationships that you want. Bye-bye. Think I'd try this a new way. I'm gonna show you the tricks that I know. I'm getting tired of talking, and I need more of a show.